It's easy to forget just how dark dandadan can get, especially when its darkest backstories come from seemingly random characters like Acrobatic Silky. But with just one episode, fans fell in love with her because of her tragedy, the tragedy of her relationship with Ira, and the tragedy of her life as a struggling single mother. But how exactly did Tatsu get us to care so much about a character we just met and only knew for a few chapters? And what is it about her story that still makes it the darkest in all of dandadan? In this video, I'm gonna analyze Acrobatic Silky's backstory, discuss how Tatsu creates an unforgettable character in one of dandadan's shortest arcs, and explain why there's no other character quite as tragic as Acrobatic Silky. Obviously, this video will contain spoilers if you haven't seen this arc yet. But on that note, we need to talk about why Acrobatic Silky instantly became popular as soon as everyone saw her story. And the way Tatsu does that is by dramatically shocking viewers. Acrobatic Silky appears to be a run-of-the-mill monster when she's introduced. It seems like the characters are done with her, but that's before we realize Ira is dead. In this moment, Acrobatic Silky rips off her entire jaw in an extreme test of loyalty, and right after that, we see what could only be Acrobatic Silky in her past life as a single mother, selling herself out to make ends meet. This series of shocking twists instantly grabs our attention, not just because it's dramatic, but because it's so unexpected in a story that has mostly been lighthearted and goofy up until this point. In other stories, one of the fastest ways to lose fans is by introducing a character with a bunch of exposition or some story that you can see coming a mile away. But Acrobatic Silky instantly sets herself apart from the other monsters, making viewers instantly engaged. But that's just how we get through the door. Obviously, the next problem is how to present the character in a way that viewers can actually make an emotional investment, which is especially difficult for a character that we just met and that we only see for a handful of chapters. But that's the thing about writing characters. People have this misconception that you can only write great characters if you have 3 books to do it, but you can write a character in 1 chapter that's potentially better than a character you watch for 1,000 chapters, because they both need one simple thing to keep you hooked: an arc. A trajectory for the character that readers can see and then use to invest in the character. And the way to communicate that arc in the beginning is by establishing the character's motivation. In Acrobatic Silky's case, we see that her motivation is to provide the best life for her daughter, even if it means she has to be miserable. And this is fleshed out in a number of ways. We see the demeaning jobs she has to work to provide for her daughter. We see how every penny she makes goes to her daughter. She doesn't spend any of it on herself. And what's brilliant about the way Tatsu does this is that he goes out of his way to show us that Silky is a future-oriented person. Because it would be one thing to just show her buying food and clothes for her daughter, but we see that on top of providing food and shelter, Silky also spends all of her free time teaching her daughter how to dance. It's a very subtle detail, because it's easy to think, wow, she's a good mom. But that's just the surface. Acrobatic Silky is such a good mom that she doesn't even spend time for herself. She doesn't give her kid an iPad so that she can have time where she isn't needed. Even when she doesn't need to be doing anything, she fills up her time by teaching her daughter, something that you only do if you're selfless and if you're thinking about the future of your child. With this context, it makes perfect sense why she saves money to buy the dress for her daughter, because you could argue this was a stupid way to spend money, that she should have invested it in a college fund or a rainy day fund. But this dress is a future-oriented decision, because as we see in her final moments, Acrobatic Silky always had one thing on her mind: was I a good mother? Buying a dress has its fleeting joy, but for a little kid, that's something they'll wear for months and something they'll remember for years. So in her mind, when Acrobatic Silky gets old, she can look back on memories like the dress and say that she was a good mom. And on that note, we have to give credit to Science Saru for adding a hidden detail. You probably noticed that Acrobatic Silky's daughter wears dance shoes that are a bit too big, but what you might have missed is that this was never in the manga. Go to the manga and the little girl's shoes fit just fine. As people immediately realized, Acrobatic Silky was giving her daughter big shoes so that she would grow into them and wouldn't need to buy new shoes every year. This shows that Science Saru understands just how future-oriented Acrobatic Silky really was, going so far as to give her daughter clothes that would last her entire childhood. and it's details like this that get us invested. Acrobatic Silky grabs our attention with dramatic gestures, and once we're open, she grabs our hearts by demonstrating her determination to provide a real future for her daughter. Naturally, we invest in this arc because we're anticipating and hoping for a future where this hard work pays off. But, as we know, this payoff never comes. And this is where Tatsu completes Acrobatic Silky's arc by adding 2 character-defining moments. Because as we are all painfully aware, you can have all the great writing in the world, but if you don't have a satisfying ending, or at the very least, an ending fitting for the character, it kinda ruins any of the earlier writing. Thankfully, Tatsu doesn't disappoint. Although I guess technically he does because this is really sad. But sad in like a good way. As we know, Acrobatic Silky has her daughter ripped away from her and her tiny little home burned to the ground. Her daughter was her entire life, so with her gone, this is where Acrobatic Silky's life ends. She pays a beautifully sad tribute to her daughter with one final dance before she's cursed and stuck in purgatory as a yokai. Roaming the world as a spirit, Acrobatic Silky is looking for her daughter, even though she can't remember her at all. This shows us how strong her motivation is because the desire to nurture is stronger than the actual memory of her daughter. Sadly, this memory loss leads to confusion when she meets Ira, who happens to be looking for her own mother. And of course, this is where she confuses Ira for her daughter and becomes the Acrobatic Silky we know her as. This is the first tragic irony of Acrobatic Silky, namely that she spends years protecting Ira when she doesn't realize that she's not actually her daughter. This gives Acrobatic Silky purpose, but that purpose is obviously sad because it's based on a lie, or at least something that was never true. But what's even sadder is what Acrobatic Silky says in her final moments. She says that she wished she had done more for her daughter. Which is depressing because here's a woman that gave every fiber of her being for her daughter, and even as a lost ghost, she still feels like she never did enough. On top of that, because of how things turned out, she wishes she had never been her mother so that her daughter would have had a better life. And this is the true tragedy of Acrobatic Silky. Not that she had to work like a dog just to make ends meet. Not that she was robbed and beaten before she died. But the fact that even when her life was over, she couldn't let go because of her guilt. A feeling so strong that it compelled her to haunt a total stranger. A sense of shame so powerful that it practically wipes out all of the good memories she should have. The tragedy of Acrobatic Silky is that, despite doing everything she could to be a good mother, she could never be happy because she had an unrealistic idea of a good life for her daughter. This ideal inspired her to be the world's best mom, but it's also what cursed her to be a lost soul, even when she had earned her rest. And this is how Acrobatic Silky earns her spot as an instantly iconic character. We get the initial shock, we get the investment in her goal as a mother, and then we're left with this memory of this good mom who was never able to provide a great life. This is all you need to have an unforgettable character. You don't need volumes upon volumes of character growth. You don't need to revolutionize media or something. All you need is one good moment to create a great character. And this is exactly what Tatsu does. Granted, he gives us several beautiful scenes, but together, they offer one emotionally powerful experience that follows its own complete story. And what's even better about this story is that it's one that's especially relevant today. In a world where inflation never stops, more people can't afford housing, and jobs feel more and more demeaning, Acrobatic Silky's story is one that any person of any background can invest in. Whether you're someone who never feels like they're doing enough, someone who's busting their butt, hoping that it will eventually pay off, or someone with a kid who means more to you than they could ever know, this story represents the modern tragedy of dandadan's yokai. These are not fantasy creatures living in towers. These are the spirits of lost souls who had very real problems. Even someone like Evil Eye, who lived hundreds of years ago, reflects the increasingly relevant issue of people feeling unseen in a time where there's more eyes on us than ever. And yet, somehow, no other character has left quite the same impact as Acrobatic Silky. I would argue that the only other story quite as emotional as this one is Ouji's, but that's a story I definitely want to save for another video. Acrobatic Silky is an instantly unforgettable character, and it's because her tragedy is one that's immediately recognizable. It's shocking, inspiring, and depressing. It has all the requirements for a good character in all of what really amounts to just one episode. And that is how you write a beautifully tragic character.